This is a 2025 Porsche Panamera 4e Hybrid, the third generation base hybrid powertrain model of Porsche's four-door sedan. Yet, we still have more than 450 horsepower and quite a bit of luxury too. This is also the base of e-hybrid Panameras. The 4 comes below the 4S, the Turbo, and the Turbo S e-hybrids. This third generation model also brings new styling, an updated interior, and improved chassis technology to help both the ride and handling. So, with that, how does this latest Porsche sedan drive? Let's find out. I review all kinds of cars and I have fun every time. Please subscribe and join me. The base price of the 2025 Porsche Panamera 4e Hybrid costs $117,495. And my test car included many options and cost $131,975. All right, with that, now is a good time for me to pull over and show you around and inside and under the hood of this third generation Panamera. Looking at the front of the Panamera, you can see that the third generation is evolutionary, not revolutionary, and that suits me just fine. I think Porsche made a huge improvement in styling from the first to second generation, and this is just refining it a bit. You do see a couple of new things. We do have these matrix LED headlamps right here. We have this additional air intake slot right here, and then we have some daytime running lights, some additional lighting way off to the side right here. Overall, I think it's a clean and interesting design. I think it's a nice long hood that slopes down, looks low, looks mean. I think it's cool. But we do have a really interesting powertrain to talk about. Let's look under the hood. And there it is, your 2.9 liter V6 with an 8-speed PDK transmission that has built into it an electric motor to give you a grand total of 463 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. The front axle center line is basically right above this strut tower brace as well. So some of the engine is definitely ahead of the front axle center line, but a decent portion of it is actually behind it. And with the PDK and everything else behind that, and with all-wheel drive, this is probably a pretty well evenly distributed weight balance for the chassis. That's nice to see. And the hood closes with a really satisfying sound. Looking at the third generation Panamera in profile, this gives you a nice look at the ice gray metallic paint. It is an $830 optional color, and I do think it looks nice. And this gives you a sense of how long this car truly is. This is just under 200 inches, the Panamera. I will go ahead and put the dimensions up on the screen for you to see and let you know I have a lot more information in the description. Standard wheels on the Porsche Panamera 4e Hybrid are 19s, but this has the $2,840 20-inch wheels installed. It also nicely exposes these slotted and massive brake rotors and this huge Porsche fixed brake caliper right up front. And yes, this is a plug-in hybrid, but it's also a Porsche. We have a staggered wheel setup on this car. The wheels and tires in back are wider than the ones in front. Looking at the rear of the car, there are a couple of other design elements that show you it's a third generation model. We've got this frameless rear windshield right here, a very steeply raked frameless rear windshield, and we also have these taillights that run, of course, right across the width of the car. This is a trend that we see on pretty much every new car. Opening the power lift gate exposes this nice little charge pack suitcase right here, and otherwise 15 cubic feet of cargo space. pull a couple levers on the top of the second row, and you have 45 cubic feet of space, and still plenty of room for you and a passenger. Plenty of utility in this Porsche Panamera. Let's check out the inside. Of course, there are luxuries to talk about, as I mentioned. The first one is we have, as standard equipment, soft closing doors. Also, push button start is right here on the left hand side. We are in the e-power mode at the moment, but I turned the car on because we have the optional 4-zone climate control system. So we have our nice little screen right here with several different things to choose from, not least of which is the ventilation, temperature, and all those kind of fun things. Going with the 4-zone climate control system costs $1,320. We also have this two-tone black and Bordeaux red leather throughout the car. That is an optional $4,330. I do have headroom, not tons, but I do have headroom, and I also have a good 2 or 3 inches of knee room, and the seat bottoms aren't terribly high, but they are sloped back, so thigh support isn't bad, but it is on the tight side. I do have right around a 90-degree bend in my knees. Overall, you wouldn't want to put adults in here for long trips, I would say, but for shorter drives, I don't think it would be a problem at all. Of course, the rear doors are also soft close as well. On the front door, we do have 3-position driver's seat memory. We do have the usual controls right here, including tailgate lift right there. We do have several power adjustments for the seat down low, and a couple of buttons for the lights next to the start-stop button. The steering wheel itself is a reasonable diameter with a nice thick rim and a nice soft leather to hold on to. It is also a heated steering wheel. The button is back here, and now you know it's on, now you know it's off. And we also have controls to the right and to the left, and we also have our drive mode dial right here, and this is the sport response button. We also have paddle shifters, upshift on the right, downshift on the left, and the usual controls on stocks behind that. Behind that is our fully digital 12.6-inch instrument cluster, and next to that, a 10.9-inch center display. And optionally available, but not on this Panamera, you could have another 10.9-inch passenger display. The center display does also include wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. You do also get a wireless smartphone charger right here, and a couple more USB Type-C ports next to that. Standard equipment on the Porsche Panamera are heated seats, but optional for $830 is ventilated seats. So it's interesting to me. Heated steering wheel is standard, soft closing doors are standard, ventilated seats, $840. You can also see that this screen takes care of the first 2 of your 4 zones of climate control, and it's a lovely system integrated into the lower center console really well. Just above that, we do have our traction control off button. Also, if you wish, you can have the spoiler extended at all times. I'll show you what that looks like. It looks like that. Oh, and since I have the door open, I'll show you that we have the optional Bose sound system, which is $1,600. We do have one additional option to talk about. This Panamera is equipped with the thermally and noise canceling glass on the car, which is definitely nice. We'll definitely have to test that as well. Let's talk drive modes. We have 4 of them. They are e-power, which I showed you right here, hybrid, sport, which turns the car on because you use it for full power, not for fuel economy. And then full boogie, we have Sport Plus as well. We do also have adjustable shock absorbers. That's also standard equipment. So that firms up the shocks and the air suspension, which is also standard equipment on this car. We will definitely play with e-power and hybrid a little bit, but I'm going to spend most of my time in Sport and at least some of the time in Sport Plus. But to do that, we have to get back to the drive, so let's get back to the drive. All right, let's dig into the powertrain. Where does 463 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque come from? Well, the single biggest contributor is a twin-turbocharged 2.9-liter V6 that also resides in the base Panamera and Panamera 4. However, it's actually detuned in the 4E hybrid. You get 300 horsepower at 5,400 RPM and 309 pound-feet of torque between 1,900 and 4,800 RPM. But it then bolts up to an 8-speed PDK dual-clutch transmission that has an electric motor built into it. That electric motor, on its own, makes 187 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque. When everything's working together, that's how we get the big 463 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque that we get. By the way, by integrating the electric motor into the housing of the PDK, Porsche managed to shave 11 pounds of weight off of the PDK. Ironically enough, the new for last year Porsche Cayenne e-hybrid makes very similar power and torque to this Panamera e-hybrid, but it does so in a different way. The Cayenne gets a 3-liter V6 and an 8-speed automatic transmission, but the Cayenne does use the same battery pack, just like every single Panamera does. It's a 400-volt, 25.9 kilowatt-hour battery pack. And of course, because this is a Panamera 4, all that power eventually gets to all 4 wheels. This being a Porsche plug-in hybrid, we don't have any kind of one-pedal driving, even though we do have an electric-only mode. Porsche likes to be old school in that sense. To slow the car down, you press the brake. To speed the car up, you press the accelerator. But Porsche does still use the electric motor to help decelerate the Panamera and recoup some of that electricity from doing so. In fact, Porsche says it can collect up to 88 kilowatts of power when it does that. All I know is that when I use the brakes, however I use them, I get a linear buildup of stopping power and a nice confident pedal. I'm happy with the way Porsche integrates the brakes, although I must admit, I do kind of enjoy one-pedal driving, so I'm kind of split for this particular trade. One final thing, you can tell the Panamera to either maintain the battery charge that you have or even charge the battery with the internal combustion engine. If you do that, it will maintain an 80% charge of the battery and will do so when you're traveling more than 34 miles an hour. But okay, that's a lot of facts and figures about this powertrain. How does it feel? Really good. Floor the accelerator. I get it kicked down and then lots of pull. It takes the PDK a moment to kick down, but once you get the kick down, you get a lot of power and you get it swiftly. And that was in the hybrid driving mode. If I first switch it to Sport, the engine livens up right away. The engine kicks on and pretty much stays on all the time. The PDK is in a sportier mode and tends to stay in a lower gear to keep the revs up. So if I floor the accelerator now, yeah, I get some pull right away from the electric motor and then faster kick down and lots of pull. That is quick. And we're only halfway there. I still have the Sport Plus driving mode. Switch it to that, and first of all, you feel right away that the suspension, the chassis goes full stiff. The shock absorbers are now in the Sport Plus mode as well. Not to mention the air suspension actually lowers the Panamera a little bit as well. Anyway, floor the accelerator. Oh yeah, yeah. And you get all the acceleration right away. That is massive amounts of pull. That is a fast reaction. You get all the help from the electric motor immediately, and then as soon as the PDK can help out with the internal combustion engine, oh, you get quite a lot, and you get it quickly. The noticeable difference between the hybrid mode and Sport in Sport Plus, it's the biggest differences between hybrid and Sport is that how quickly the electric motor helps out and pumps in as much torque as it can. Don't forget, the electric motor is the single biggest source of torque in this Panamera, 331 pound-feet. So when it pulls as hard as it can, you get a healthy amount of force from that. Overall, it's a fantastic, dynamic, and remarkably smooth powertrain. I really love it. And you actually get pretty decent fuel economy, courtesy of being a plug-in hybrid. If you start with a healthy battery charge, you get 55 miles per gallon equivalent combined fuel economy. Now, once the battery's depleted, it's only a so-so number. You get 21 miles per gallon combined, but considering all the power you get and the fact that you're hauling around a more than 5,000 pound vehicle, it's still pretty good, I would say. Of course, when you have a Porsche and when you have a PDK that has launch control, you know what's more fun than fuel economy? Even though fuel economy is important, accelerating. Of course I had to test it. Let me show you that right now. All right, everybody, time for an acceleration test in this base Panamera hybrid, but we do have 463 horsepower, a PDK transmission with launch control, so I'm expecting it's going to be pretty good still. I do have it in the Sport Plus driving mode. I do have stability control restricted, Sport. Let's see how this goes. Okay, coming to a complete stop. Foot hard on the brake, floor of the accelerator. 4,800 RPM off the brake. Oh, nice. Wow, fast shifts too. Oh man, revs to like 6,800 RPM, then off to the next gear. Woo! Wow. This is the base Porsche Panamera hybrid, and yet Porsche says 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, and based on that launch, woo, I have no doubts at all. Porsche also says you'll eventually get to 174 miles an hour if you keep your foot in it. No reason to doubt that either. Excellent acceleration from this plug-in hybrid Porsche sedan. All right, let's dig into the chassis. Porsche put a lot of work into the third generation Panamera chassis, and it shows. First of all, you get a healthy amount of standard equipment. You get standard Porsche Active Suspension Management, which is Porsche's term for adjustable shock absorbers, and these are 2-valve shock absorbers. There is a separate valve for the compression versus the rebound of the shock, which gives a lot more flexibility in how it's tuned and makes it a lot easier to adjust to different conditions and deliver optimal damping in more situations. On top of that, we get a standard air suspension, which means that it can firm up the spring rate, it can adjust the ride height, and that's thanks to the fact that we have a 400-volt battery pack that can run the air suspension. What's optional on the Panamera hybrid that this car does not have is an active ride suspension that will use hydraulics to actually overcome the natural movements of a car as it's going through accelerating or braking or cornering. So you'll actually lean in when you're accelerating, lean back when you're braking, and lean into a corner instead of turning away from it. That's a really clever system. I've seen it on a couple of different cars. The most fun one for me was McLaren. It's hard not to have fun in a McLaren, but that's also a very, very, very expensive car. Anyway, I digress. This Porsche does have the $1,350 rear axle steering option, which means that in tight spaces, this is highly maneuverable, a lot more maneuverable than you'd expect a 200-inch long car nearly to be. And when you're going faster and you turn the wheel, it's more stable than you'd expect. Put all of that together, and this is one of the nicest riding and nicest handling Panameras I've ever been in. And this is the base hybrid, don't forget. Even in the hybrid driving mode, turning the wheel, it gets a good reaction. You get nice response from the front end. And the steering's pretty light, but it's still pretty precise as well. Switch it to the sport driving mode, and the wheel gets a little heavier, and you can tell the suspension's a lot stiffer, so we're getting very little body roll when we move the steering back and forth. And we're getting a little bit of rain, but fortunately the pavement's still pretty dry and the car still feels plenty stable. All right, Sport Plus driving mode. Do this all over again. Now I'm in the stiffest version of everything. First of all, the wheel weights up really nicely, so it feels really good. And I've got really sharp response from the front end. Plus, the body is not moving. It is staying very, very flat. It belies its 2.5 ton weight when you're in the Sport Plus driving mode. And yet, I have to be honest, when we go over little lumps and bumps in the road, it's not that bad. It's not that stiff. So it's actually shockingly compliant when you're in the Sport Plus driving mode. In the hybrid mode, it's downright comfortable. In the Sport mode, it's perfectly pleasant. And in the Sport Plus mode, it's still pretty good from a ride point of view. And yet, handling feels sharp. So even though it's raining a little bit, of course I had to test the handling. Let me show you that right now. All right, everybody, time for a handling test. I do have it in the Sport Plus driving mode, and I do have stability control in Sport again, but I do also have the windshield wipers on occasion. It is not perfectly dry outside. So we'll see how much that tempers things. Let's see how it feels. Oh, yes. Well, plenty of acceleration, certainly. We get some understeer, but the turn-in response is sharp. Wow. The amount of control in the body is impressive. There's a little bit more understeer than I expected, though, to be honest. Oh, yeah. Feel the weight moving over those whoops in the road. Sharp turn-in response, though. Wow. Wow. Even in that off-camber turn, you have a good sense of where the grip is. The turn-in response, I love. This is a much sharper, fast-witted front end than I expected. We do have understeer. We don't have quite as much of a neutral balance as I expected in the Sport Plus driving mode, but it's not excessive understeer, and there's a lot of grip there. And critically, just like every Porsche, it communicates with the driver really well. This isn't intimidating to drive fast, even though it's very capable. This is the base hybrid Panamera, and I'm still really enjoying myself around some curvy roads. Fantastic handling, third generation Panamera. Any car is going to spend some time on the interstate, and if you're getting a big Porsche sedan, you're probably going to spend a healthy amount of time on the interstate. Of course, I had to test it there as well. Let me show you that. All right, everybody, time for a quick stint on the interstate, and I do have the on-ramp to myself. And we get a bit of understeer, but we also have a lot of grip. Okay, now we are on the interstate, and I will set the cruise control to 78 miles an hour to go with traffic. I do have it in the hybrid driving mode, and I do have all the systems on, like lane keep assist. However, lane keep assist is not lane centering, so it's more of if you get off of the lane, it'll push you back towards the center, but it will not keep you there. So this is nothing like Lexus lane tracing assist. This will largely be a test of how comfortable the Panamera is on the interstate more than anything else. And I have to say, pretty darn. The engine is spinning around 1700 RPM at the 78 mile an hour speed. So when it's in 8th gear, it is very much in the background. You can barely hear it. Wind noise is also very nicely subdued, nice and quiet. I'm not hearing any buffeting anywhere. Road noise, on the other hand, is a little bit elevated for a car that is at this price point. I was expecting it to be a little bit quieter, but the ride is silky smooth. And considering how much firmness you can get out of this chassis when you're in the Sport Plus driving mode, the ride is really, really good. And the comfort in the seats is also very, very nice. Everything other than the road noise is just top marks. This is a very, very pleasant car. And if you want, you can go to the e-power mode and turn the engine off completely and just use the battery pack to drive you along. You'll notice that the amount of noise we get virtually unchanged because the engine is so quiet in general. On short trips, you can just keep this thing in e-power mode, never touch the gas tank. Overall, this is a very comfortable car, a very pleasant riding car, and an excellent highway cruiser. So, what do I think of this third generation Porsche Panamera 4 e-hybrid? There is quite a lot to like here. The amount of luxury you get in the base Cayenne hybrid really impressed me, but it is also a little bizarre. I would happily not have soft closed doors, but then take standard ventilated seats as an example. Then again, being a Michigan boy, I do appreciate heated seats and the heated steering wheel, to be sure. And I also appreciate that standard equipment includes the chassis components, the air suspension, the adjustable shock absorbers, to give you that soft ride and the sharp handling all at once. As far as the screens inside are concerned, it's fine. It's the trend, it's the way every car is going, and I think Porsche executed well here. I still prefer the traditional analog gauges and a little bit more focus on the drive. I understand, especially in the Panamera, why Porsche went this route, and I'm fine with it. Critically, Porsche delivered on the driving experience. This car feels sharp, it still communicates with the driver, and it handles really, really well. The Panamera is expensive. There's no two ways around it. But if you're one of the lucky few that can afford something like this, you are in for a treat. I'm Robin Warner. Thank you very much for watching.